It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Paolo Mazzucato. Hi, Paolo. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. It's very nice to be here.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. Always nice to have you here, although this is your first time, so I should say it's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
But anyways, so you came through Charlie Barrett, I see, and Charlie is a great guy. I've known Charlie for several years. We had him on the show a couple of years ago, and
fun.
He's got
he's been great. He's been helping a lot with publicity and stuff, and that's he's certainly knows what he's doing. So it's great that he helped me out on this. So
he's a veteran in this business. Absolutely, he's been around for a long time, and I always like to mention that he's the only person that I've ever interviewed who met all four Beatles in the same room. And I thought that was pretty cool because I've had other musicians on who have met one or met, somebody. But all four of them all together at Abbey Road Studio when they were still the Beatles. And I thought, okay, that's impressive.
That's cool. Yeah.
But aside from that, he's a great guy, and all the guests that he sends our way are always good guests. So hoping you live up to that.
I hope I can live up to that, yeah.
Well, anyways, so it's nice to have you here. You are an author and screenwriter.
Yes. And
looks like you have published several children's books. No One Mocks a Panda. That's a great title.
That was a good one.
So how many books do you have published at this point?
Oh, let's see. No One Mocks a Panda. Well, I published. There was one. Rainbow. There's like five or six children's books, and then the two novels. The most recent one being AJ and the Incredible Fish. But No One Mocks a Panda came out in, I think it was 2019, and it was that was quite. It sort of dealt with the whole thing of diversity and sort of accepting people for what they bring to the idea of being no one mocks the panda for being both black and white. That idea that all animals have different things about them that make them special and make them contributing members of the animal kingdom, obviously in a way that suggests that people as well have different strengths that they bring to the table. So, you don't criticize a giraffe for having too long a neck or. So, anyways, the whole idea of that book was well received, and it actually became a number one bestseller for Amazon. So that was good for that one. And then since then, I published a couple different ones. Another popular one was I did the story of La Befana, which I don't know if you're familiar with they call it the Italian Christmas witch, but she's basically an old grandmother type who delivers presents to children on the eve of the Epiphany. So it's sort of an Italian Christmas story, but I sort of took the traditional tale and twisted it a bit and made it a little more fun and popular. So that did well as well. But again, I have fun writing both children's books that are sort of geared towards 3 to 8 in age range, and then my novels tend to be fantasy adventure that are geared more towards middle grade and young adult, 8 and up. But it's been wonderful because, again, I started with in film, and I worked in the film industry, writing screenplays for different productions, mostly on the never at the studio level, but sort of at the low budget or independent film, and it's a very different animal because obviously with screenwriting it's about minimalism. You don't put a lot on the page. You just sort of want to get the broad strokes, and it gets interpreted and then brought to life. Whereas with a book or a novel especially, you're sort of doing a more detailed work as far as trying to really create these images, mental images for people when they're reading it, that they can get the whole gist of the story instead of just a blueprint. So, but it's all been interesting in terms of trying to get a story and trying to get trying to get it out and for people to enjoy it. So,
which one do you prefer? Do you prefer novel writing or screenwriting?
They're so different that I don't know if I could say I prefer one. I enjoy the in novel writing. I enjoy the creation of when you're working. You have to really hone your skill in terms of what words you use and how you describe things. Whereas with screenwriting, the great satisfaction of actually seeing it on screen and having actors say the words that you've written, that's a different kind of satisfaction. Whereas with writing a novel, it's the satisfaction comes with completing it, and then obviously it goes out into the world, and hopefully people enjoy it as much as you did when you were writing it. So, but they're very different, and I enjoy them both really. So.
Well, I've had both on the show. I mean, authors of novels and screenwriters, and usually they come with a story that they tried screenwriting, couldn't make a nickel, so then they decided to start writing novels, and then they became somewhat successful, or the other way around. So it sort of depends. But you started out as a screenwriter, correct?
I did. I came out from Chicago. I came out in I don't remember now. Back in '89 or '90. I came out with the intention of working in the film industry because obviously the film industry is out in California. I worked at different independent production companies, and eventually I was pitching ideas to another independent production company, and they started buying my pitches and having me write the screenplays. It's funny because it's like at a studio level, it's a completely different thing, but at the independent level, it's okay. Yeah, we like your idea. We're going to shoot in 3 weeks. It's like, oh. Yeah, so that was an intensive 3 weeks for me just to get a project. What I found, though, is that perhaps different at a different level, the studios, they have a certain product that they create, and independents have a completely different product. And so what I found I needed to do with the stories that I really wanted to tell, I mean, obviously, The Gondoliers, which is the first novel I wrote, is a fantasy adventure about a young girl who goes to Venice to find her uncle, and it's set in the 1900s. It's something that perhaps a J.K. Rowling can get something like that made into a film, but when you're at my level, it's more difficult in terms of it's a big budget production. So rather than write that as a screenplay, that I had limited access to the people that would actually greenlight something like that. I wrote it as a novel, and so I can do in writing novels stuff that I can't necessarily do in writing screenplays, because most of the screenwriting work I did was for thrillers or disaster movies or things that are different genre. So the fantasy adventure genre is something that I enjoy immensely, and so I sort of tend to gravitate towards writing as a novel, just because I know that I can put it down on paper exactly the way I want it and the way I see it in my head. And then, who knows? At some point, if a studio wanted to come along and say, "Hey, this could make a great film," I'm all for that as well. But it's a finished form as opposed to a screenplay, which is kind of a blueprint.
Well, that makes sense. So I was going to ask you if any of your books had been turned into film, but I guess not at this point, right?
Books, no. The children's books are obviously they're not really feature length, but the Gondoliers, which again would make a nice adventure, I think, and certainly AJ is very cinematic, I think. Not yet. So we're working on presenting them in the right way, in the right time, and the right place to the right people.
Well, which is more difficult then to sell, a screenplay or a novel? I mean, in terms of the novel, you want to find a publisher unless you want to do it yourself. A screenplay, right. You really can't do anything yourself unless you've got a lot of money and a whole production crew at your disposal. And do you know what I mean? If you had all kinds of money, you could do it, sure. But
yeah.
With a novel, you've got to sell it to a publisher, or you've got to self-publish it on Amazon and go that route. But what do you do with the screenplay? once it's finished, you could just shop it around to various studios and production people who might want to do it?
Yeah, screenwriting is a lot about access. I mean, you need to you can't cold shop to any studios because they won't look at unsolicited materials. So basically, similarly to books, if you want to go through the major studios, you need to go through an agent. So first you're shopping for an agent, and then of course the agent has to like your work enough to represent you, and then they have to have the correct contacts as well, because if you end up signing with an agent that doesn't have the right contacts with the right types of producers and the right studios that can make that particular genre, you're not going to sell a fantasy adventure to Blumhouse. I mean, they're very geared towards making the horror genre, so it might not work out. So in that respect, I think screenwriting is difficult because, once again, it's not a finished product. It's a transitional type thing. Here's the blueprint for a film with the dialogue and the scenes, and then of course it needs to be brought to life by a director, obviously the producer has to get on board, and you got to get actors. So there's a lot more people involved with bringing that to its finished form. Whereas with a novel, you write it and it's in its finished form, and then you just have to sell it. So I think in that respect, screenwriting is certainly more difficult than writing a novel. The actual craft itself, though, I think is again very different because the novel is much more detailed in terms of how you're describing things and how you're really bringing that image, that mental image in your head, bringing it out on paper. It requires a lot more, I think, in terms of both style, but also just the substance of how you use your language and how you describe things, which is something that in screenwriting, again, because it's very minimalist, it's just get down the page. You're not looking to write a whole paragraph on describing the scene. You're looking at describe it in 2 words if you can, and then move on. So again, very different, but both challenging.
We're quickly running down on time here, so let's make sure we get your latest book in, which is called AJ and the Incredible Fish. Why don't you give us an overview of the story?
Well, it's a very again, the adventure part of it is certainly something that young readers can enjoy. It's a young boy who doesn't necessarily want to spend the weekend with his grandfather because his grandfather's always telling him these wild, incredible, fish tales. And he's sort of gone through a period where the father has left the family, so he's been duped before. He's been hurt in that respect, so he doesn't necessarily want to believe in anything that's unbelievable. And of course, on this weekend with his grandfather basically recognizes that he's at this point where he's in danger of being lost forever in the ordinary, and he needs to view life with extraordinary eyes. And so Grandpa casts off, and they go off on this quest to find this incredible fish that Grandpa told them about, that he tried to catch 30 years ago with his shipmates Riley and Marlin. And so AJ, of course, is not on board with this. We got to go back. They also have a young girl that joins them on the boat, and she's all excited about this. So you have these very differing perspectives of fantasy and of believing. And through the course of the adventure, of course, it's a fantastic adventure to islands and chases across the desert and a prison break and all these adventures that they go on. AJ is forced to recognize that perhaps his closed-minded view of what real is, what things are possible, has to expand. And so Grandpa sort of shows him a world that is that makes him open to the possibilities. And of course, that lesson of the only real danger in life comes from never leaving the shore. And it's a message that not only young readers can enjoy, but older readers as well. It's that notion that we have to go out and we have to try. We have to attempt to do incredible things in life, and only by doing so are we really living. And that's where it goes.
I'm looking at the cover, and 2 movies came to mind while you were talking: Pirates of the Caribbean and Narnia.
Interesting, yeah. Well, I certainly think, I would hope that the adventure, Pirates of the Caribbean certainly has that adventure quotient up there. And Narnia has that fantasy element of also things that on the surface are just a very fun adventure. And on the subtext level, it's something with deeper meaning. I'm flattered to be compared to either of those two. And I certainly, I grew up with my favorite Gulliver's Travels was that idea of an adventure that also the subtext was very profound. And certainly adventures like The Wizard of Oz and things like that sort of have that feel, I think, of going into a world that is fantastical, but at the same time, things mean things. So it's like you understand that it's a representation of our real world in a fantasy element that can, show us ways that we need to approach life and show us ways that we need to think of things that are not necessarily real in the sense of what we recognize as the real world. Fantasy can give us that ability to explore and the ability to see things for more than what they seem to be.
Is this set in modern time, or is it set in the pirate days of the 1800s?
No, AJ and the Incredible Fish is contemporary.
Okay.
Gondoliers was set back. The Gondoliers was set back in the 1900s, whereas with this one, I went completely contemporary. It's a young boy living in Maui, in Hawaii, and he goes to visit his grandpa. And once they go off into the Grandpa casts off and they head out into the storm, then the world becomes anything you want it to be. Because certainly there are parts of it that seem like obviously the antagonist is this peg-leg pirate who's basically doubt, trying to keep them from their eventual goal, trying to keep them and saying, hey, the great fish is too difficult. You should just give up. And of course, again, different aspects seem like early in the story, he's in a history class with his teacher in his school, and they're studying about ancient Egypt. They're studying about the Roman times, and so within this world that they enter, there are aspects of those things that come to play as well. So it's a little bit of everything.
Well, this would make a good children's film. I mean, do you have any connections at Disney?
Curiously enough, I have. I've worked with some people in different at different places in different times. That I'm trying to think if there's. Yeah, I think I know some people at Disney, and certainly at DreamWorks and Warner Brothers, and so it's not completely out of the question. But I think AJ would certainly make a fun film. It's actually one of the reviewers called that out and said it seems like a summer blockbuster film with that kids and adults would both enjoy. So I said, thank you.
Well, I mean, it depends how far you wanted to take it. I mean, a production like this could go $100 million,
Oh, sure.
So,
yeah.
What was the budget for Narnia?
I don't know. I don't know the budget for that one.
I have to look.
But it certainly has.
It would be up there.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. It's certainly. I mean, when you're talking about this type of, productions from like Pirates of the Caribbean, as you mentioned, or heck, Harry Potter even. I mean, you have that fantasy element that requires a certain budget level to pull off convincingly. You can't necessarily do this on a shoestring budget. I mean, you can, but it's not going to be acceptable to an audience.
No, you have
to
have
a certain level of expectation.
You have to pay those 300 CGI guys. The ones at the end of the credits that just go on forever. And it's strange that when CGI started to become a thing, I thought, oh well, this is going to make movie making cheaper because the computers are doing all the work. Wrong. That was not the case at all, because you have to pay all of these people to do all the rendering, and I mean it's just endless.
Sure. Yeah. I mean the budgets for big budget projects that integrate live action and animation. Even if you look at like the last Star Wars movies that they made, that they sort of went back to try to do things practically on set as opposed to just having CGI characters. They would have prosthetics and people in suits, and then they'd enhance it with CGI. That's still a lot of work. So even if AJ were to become a hybrid in the same way that Harry Potter is live action, but there are certainly CGI elements in it, or even Pirates of the Caribbean, you have that Davy Jones is all CGI his face, but most of it is live action. So there's a wide range of ways to make films nowadays, and I think that the audience expectation of what is acceptable, and it's sort of like when you look at sci-fi and you think, Star Wars in the 1960s, 66 and 67, I mean, that was considered, sci-fi. Nowadays, that wouldn't fly anymore because you've had Star Wars and you've had so many films subsequent to that the audience would look at 1960s Star Trek and say, well, that's kind of hokey. The effects are kind of, stuff that you did in your garage.
The one thing that always disappointed me was, and I know that they did a great job of trying to get it, but when the Star Wars whole series came out, and they started with number 4 back in 1977, in 77, that was awesome, right? I mean, I was there. I was old enough. And then 1, 2, and 3 came out, and then they tried to make 4 like the next one, and it just didn't quite work because you could still see them using 70s technology. Do you know what I mean? Even though they tried to clean it up and whatever, but you're looking at the graphics and it's like, oh, this is Windows 3.1. Or, and it's just not there. So
it's funny because George Lucas sort of pioneered after Stanley Kubrick's 2001 sci-fi really took a turn with he wanted to go from that realism that Kubrick was going for and turn it into fun. And basically Star Wars went fantasy and very just outrageous in terms of but again, the technology that Lucas was developing for the time was revolutionary. And then, of course, when he went back into the prequels, episodes 1, 2, and 3, he almost went too far in that direction. As some people think too far. I mean, he used a lot of CGI as opposed to practical prosthetics and characters. And so they went the other way when they did episodes. Was it 8, 9, or 7, 8, and 9?
Yeah.
So when they did those, they tried to go back to that original feel, but they went with prosthetics and characters, but they enhanced it with CGI. So I think that's a nice blend. If you look at the original trilogy of Star Wars versus the prequels versus the sequels, I think the sequels, what they did well was integrate both live action and practical effects with CGI effects. And I certainly think that's the realm of fantasy that AJ and the Incredible Fish or even the Gondoliers would benefit from that type of a treatment.
The scene that I'm thinking of is the opening scene where they're having a dogfight in the X-Wing fighters, and they take a shot of their screen, their display screen, and I just look at it and go, oh, that's just Pong. And it's what it looks like. It looks like Pong. It's that level of, as compared to an Xbox or something like that we have now. So I don't know, but I mean,
well, that's always going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Because as technology gets more advanced, things that we were projecting into the future back then. I mean, if you look at, again, keep going back to Star Trek, but you look at the control center, the control panels in Star Trek, the original series. They're all flashing lights and little blips and stuff, and nowadays it's all smooth panels, and so
right, touch screens.
Technology advances, and when you're doing fantasy, I think the benefit of doing that is you can project your ideas and your vision of what things are going to be in a fantasy world, and sort of create these things. And that's obviously another difficult thing with fantasies, that you have to describe these things in a way. And again, I'm going back to writing as opposed to filmmaking. You describe them in a way on the page that the person reading it has to visualize it and comprehend what you're talking about.
Well, I suppose it's a timestamp, because with music is the same way. I mean, regardless of the genre of music or how complicated or simple it is, if you listen to recordings that were done in the 1920s, they just sound different than the ones that were done in the 40s and in the 50s. They had a distinctive sound for that time. The music is sort of irrelevant. So, and there's nothing they can do about it, because that was just the technology they were working with. Anyways, we got to wrap this up. So the book is called AJ and the Incredible Fish. Has it been released?
Yes, I launched it at the Orange County Children's Book Festival this past September.
Okay.
And it's out there now.
All right. Last question. Do you have a website you want to give out?
Sure. My writing stuff is at www.writer.mazzucato.org, and then the book, specifically Beppy Books, is beppybooks.com. That's BEPIBOOKS.com.
Is that your publisher?
That's the publishing. They have other books there. All my books are there, I think.
Oh, okay. All right.
And my writing, the writer.mazzucato.org is basically has all my stuff from books to I did a play in Chicago, and then that's all the screenplays that I've written that have been produced.
Okay.
So they're all there.
Well, Paolo, thanks so much for coming on the show. It was nice talking to you.
Oh, it was great. It was very nice talking to you. I enjoyed this a lot. Thank you.
Best of luck with the book. I hope it does well.
Thank you so much.